Maybe dullness is associated with psychic pain because something that's dull or opaque fails to provide enough stimulation to distract people from some other deeper type of pain that is always there, if only in an ambient, low-level way, in which most of us spend nearly all our time and energy trying to distract ourselves from feeling, or at least from feeling directly or with our full attention. This comes from a quote from one of David Foster Wallace's journals, the subject of our third part today. Hello and welcome back to the library. And before we get lost amongst the stacks, I want to reintroduce my guest this week, the enigmatic aviator himself, Mr. Matthew Cortigiani. Welcome back, Cordo. How's it going?
It's going well, man. How are you? Good to be here.
I'm all right. I'm all right. And yeah, I've had a week off basically between, there was a holiday weekend, but just like a medical emergency and then work and just like all sorts of shit happening.
I'm sorry to hear that.
It's okay. Everything is fine. And everything is progressing. So life is coming at us fast these days. It's that whiplash effect, right? Like it's hard to not look at the news and feel like an eternity has passed and it's only been 20 seconds.
Yes.
Yeah. Cordo, so we're on part 3 now. We've chatted about all the way basically up to the publication of Infinite Jest, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that right now, or excuse me, the beginning of the writing of it. We talked about some tumultuous relationships that he had, his journey through sobriety, and then like his first publications. And as I mentioned, we're going to save Infinite Jest for its own episode all the way at the end, as probably David Foster Wallace would have enjoyed skipping around the timeline here. But do you have anything any expectations, anything you want to add before we start?
Well, I'm definitely, I've been really fascinated at the delve that we're doing into his mental health, and how it really seems inseparable from David Foster Wallace's works as a whole. So I'm very interested to track to see, does obviously I don't want to spoil any further information about David Foster Wallace's biography, but I'm curious if we have a sort of baseline kind of, mental health crisis throughout David Foster Wallace's life, or if we kind of have a bit of an unraveling towards the later years, and if that affects his writing. So I'm very curious to kind of check it out.
That's a great question. We will definitely talk about toward the later years and what happens there, but it's pretty cyclical in nature. That's the way I would phrase that. I think with his mental health, there's a pattern that comes even without his substance abuse or drinking and smoking literally ounces of pot a week. I think at one point, like not exaggerating, that's pretty wild. Yeah, it's a cyclical nature that we will see even come up in this episode towards the end. So speaking of the deep dive that we are going, if I'm going to plug the main source up top before I forget, Every Story is a Love Story, A Life of David Foster Wallace by the biographer D.T. Max, who does a lot to get into his mental health and describe what David Foster Wallace was thinking at the time regarding, getting off his meds, for example, multiple times. So if you want to read it, I'd recommend it if you want to learn more about his life. There's a lot I'm leaving out specifically about relationships because it's just a lot to go through. Yes. Cool. So Wallace, we ended the relationship with him and Carr because it was never really going to go out. That's Mary Carr, the poet that he got a tattoo above his on his right chest, right? Like right above his nipple, basically. Just insane stuff. Also the person who he threw out of a moving car, who threw a coffee table at, followed her around, moved to Syracuse, the kind of stalker-like, very toxic behavior. So, sure. Yeah, summarizing the end of last episode, David needed a change. So he still would miss Carr, and even though he did needed to change and he did change his life, he still sent Mary Carr lingerie anonymously in the mail and even bought a star for her on one of those websites so she can be, quote, in the sky and a little of her is always overhead, unquote, as Wallace wrote once. He went back to his just nuts. Yeah. Fucking, I cannot imagine sending lingerie to an ex, or like I don't even know how to describe the relationship if they ever had like romantic or anything like that. It's just kind of yeah, the mental health issue is definitely abundant there. He went back to his Midwest roots and was offered a new job at the Illinois State University at Bloomington Normal as a writing professor. Bloomington and Normal are two different cities. I don't know how you can call yourself Normal, Illinois. It's pretty on the nose, actually. State College was unique in that it specialized in avant-garde fiction and was home to the publication called Review of Contemporary Fiction, where loads of his works have been published previously, and from here on and even more. Again, he would turn on the charm and confidence during the interviews for his cocky response to why he should be hired was, who else? It's just crazy. Again, this was a time before background checks, and he failed to mention that he went through serious psychological rehabilitation and also drug rehabilitation. That didn't seem to be pertinent to his hiring process. Yes. The life before that. I mean, honestly, it worked out best for him, for everybody involved. He said this to his class, one of the classes when he was working at University of Illinois. Quote, "Take this time to learn to be your toughest critic and best friend. I wish I had. Concentrate on the work, loving it and hating it, and making it the best and truest expression of yourself it can be. The publication stuff will come," unquote. Sound advice overall, right?
Sounds like it.
I would say publications or the publishing stuff will come. That's not true. That's for the lucky. Honestly, it comes back to when I was studying abroad in Ireland. I was taking economics courses because I had to, because that was my major. And there was a person who worked at the stock market in Dublin who became a professor. And he said that as long as you could continue through the economics courses here, don't worry about money. Money will come. And I just looked at him and I'm like, what an arrogant and egotistical thing to say about just assuming that you just because you're an economics major, you're going to make money throughout your entire life. Like that's like American mindset stuff. And, like is capitalism poisoned Ireland this much? Like, it's not true. Yeah, throughout his time at Illinois State University, Bloomington Normal, he continued to write both Infinite Jest and a ton of nonfiction, like when he was assigned to report on the Illinois State Fair. His article ended up needing to be cut in half as it was filled largely with lies he made up, like when a bag of drugs landed directly on the lap of a cop after falling out of a person's pocket. He would start writing and he would write around him, and in order for him just naturally to make the fair seem a lot more exciting, he would start adding a little fabrication here, putting something a little bit over there, and then it just blossomed into something that was twice what they almost 4 times what they requested, and then they had to half it, and ended up basically being fiction.
Yeah.
It was entertaining nonetheless, and they published it. Infinite Jest, however, took years of back and forth and editing before it got published. The book goes into a lot of detail, so his biography about the publication history, if you are interested in it, it really isn't exciting for our purposes, honestly. It was finally published on February 1st, 1996, right? It came out with a mixture of amazing and lukewarm reviews, but it sold pretty steadily at first, and then it really started to gain notoriety and bloomed shortly after its publication and became a huge success within the literary community at first. He started attending parties for the book, him being sober at this time still, and even toured the country for book readings for the first time ever. One person joked, because it became very popular past the literary circles, in a pretty steady increase, and it just kept gaining popularity. It joked that even yippies read. This was a crowd who especially liked it, the high ends people who thought they were intellectual and more intellectual than the common person, right? To this day, there's this, I don't know how else to put it, but like a certain type of specifically man but woman reads Infinite Jest because they think that it's a book that you should read if you think you're smarter than everybody else.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah. I read it because it's a challenge, and that's why I read it. And I still think I have a higher reading capacity than most other people. Like I can read the more complicated stuff, and it was entertaining. But again, I fell into that freaking category as well. So there you go. So David Foster Wallace called his newfound fame like being watched by the red eye of Sauron, Lord of the Ring reference.
Hmm.
Any questions about the publication? Because we're really not going to talk too much about Infinite Jest, the book itself, because there's a lot to mention in the next episode.
Yeah, no, what really surprised me before getting into this process was learning, or as I was getting into this process, was learning that this was actually a heavily publicized release, which really doesn't, it seems a little off-brand for David Foster Wallace, I guess. I'm curious like how he handled the pressure. I've seen an interview on some talk show that he did where he kind of unravels over the pressure of being judged for everything he did. So I'm kind of curious how that impacted him. But yeah, it was very interesting to see.
Yeah, we'll get to that part. Yeah, and I saw the interview too. It's pretty spot on. He mentioned something, and I'm paraphrasing, like, the interviewer, and I forgot who it is, said that basically relax, like you don't have to worry about being judged. It's like I'm on television, everyone's judging me, right?
Yeah, that one, yeah.
Yeah, it's that's definitely paraphrasing. He said much more eloquently than that. But yeah, it's a great question. We're going to talk about that part in this episode. What I'll say is that the multiple years, I think it took 4 years of back and forth between the publisher and him and his editor to finally get published was an extensive process. Basically, David Foster Wallace fought for every tooth and nail to keep whatever he could possibly have in the book, sometimes reluctantly editing things out. And the book itself was going to cost upwards of $25 to $30 in 1994 to print. I don't have
Wow.
the inflation calculator out right now. If you want to look that up,
Yeah, I gotcha.
Is it 94? 96. So that is a pretty substantial cost back in the day. A $25 to $30 book today is something that I would look twice and probably not purchase, though I've definitely purchased those before. Yes.
1994 looks like that would be
96.
about
96.
96.
Sorry,
I'm
that was
sorry.
my fault.
Should be $51 to $62.
Yeah, that's a pretty good number for a
Yeah.
book. Granted, it is a form of entertainment that's going to last $50 to $60 worth, if you will. Yeah.
Sure.
Great. So the following year, after his publication, Wallace's first collection of nonfiction pieces was published as one book called A Supposedly Fun Thing I'll Never Do Again, Essays and Arguments. These were compiled from magazines he contributed to, and though it is a collection of essays and arguments, which historically sells even less than short stories and collections, it did pretty well now that people knew the name David Foster Wallace had become a bestseller with Infinite Jest. And his fame really only continued to grow, specifically because Infinite Jest fame's and cultural significance was a slow roll that just kept building. It does take a long time to read the book, granted, so that makes sense. It got to the point that people contacted the university to try and get a tennis match with DFW himself because they knew he loved tennis. Students from a neighboring college also had they had a scavenger hunt where one of the prizes or whatever the steps of a scavenger hunt was to try to take a picture with David Foster Wallace as a selfie or something of that sort back in the 90s, which is entertaining too.
Yeah.
The fame, I mean, this guy, he's pretty shy overall. Imagine being swarmed by 18, 19, 20-year-olds, probably drunk college kids from a different college, just taking pictures all the time. Probably not the best thing to do for him.
No.
The fame, no. The fame also led to more womanizing. A lot of it was fine, but there's a significant portion that I read that was frankly unethical. I'm not going to disparage anybody who doesn't want to be in relationships, whatever floats your boat for a lot of things, right? Which he did not want at this time, at least to be in a relationship. And then some points, depending on his life, he did want to be in one, of course, and we'll get to that. But even he thought his own behavior was hard to justify at times, like sleeping with students and then his ex's friends, or bragging that he slept with an underage woman when he was on tour in New Orleans for a book signing, which is referred to as a big no-no. I don't know if it's, illegal in New Orleans, and I don't know the age, but it's still a big no-no.
Sure.
Not trying to justify it at all. It's just the age of consent laws are different everywhere. I say, again, big no-no. Or the time he was in his recovery group and he realized he slept with 3 of the 10 women that are almost did with 2 others. This is a huge no-no in so many ways. Like, it's just manipulative. Yeah, he's basically playing the dentist system from It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, like making these women fall in love with him and then pretending not to care and separating entirely. There was a story that I didn't write down here that he was at a book signing and then somebody overheard under his breath angrily tell a woman, "I told you never to come back here," which is not great behavior.
No.
Now, besides literary fame, Infinite Jest also brought Davy Boy financial success. This was his first book that really brought him money from royalties. Others, he would get money from the publisher for a down payment, but otherwise royalties are starting to flow. He was also awarded several grants through his work. The first we will talk about it's the grant from the Lannan Foundation, which was a relatively young nonprofit at the time. I think it was only around for about 9 years before he actually got it. The more prestigious award was a fellowship at the MacArthur Foundation, which is considered the genius grant in the United States, and he gave him enough money to financially be stable for pretty much not having to teach for at least a short time being. Being a professor to Wallace was more of a means to an end, though there were times that he definitely enjoyed it. We chatted about the MacArthur Fellowship during our Cormac McCarthy episodes when I had Andrew on. So if you want to learn more about it, listen to those. The Kindle King himself as my guest. He's also, a very entertaining guest. We've gone through some of the negative aspects of DFW's personality, right? And I wouldn't say the word deplorable, but it's not great to be womanizing in unethical ways like that, But do you have any questions you have or any responses to his dentist system approach? I mean, it probably is a David system that he set up himself.
No, it's been very interesting to learn about. It's a lot of the times you look at historical figures and you give them a little bit of I think it's inherent that a lot of us want to give them the benefit of the doubt on some personal flaws. Classic example being like an Alexander the Great type person, where if you judge him by modern standards, it'd be a pretty horrible person, but you think, oh, in the historical time frame, maybe is a little bit different, acceptable. But David Foster Wallace, and like, this is like 20 years ago, like this was pretty recent. So it's interesting to me, talking about at a maybe very postmodern, if you really think about it, like talking about a figure who's lived so recently, in our lifetimes, and seeing behavior that, man, you really wouldn't really endorse. So it's interesting to see the dark side,
Yeah, he definitely got fame there, and famous there. He definitely used fame to an extent where it can be problematic. Yeah.
Sure.
It's funny that you mentioned Alexander the Great. I recently relearned, because I learned this as a kid, that he created a peninsula to try to get to an island, to invade that island and conquer it just out of spite. He literally changed the topography of the world to have you ever heard of this? The city of Tyre. Look it up afterwards. It's in Lebanon.
Yeah. He besieged
Lebanon.
Tyre. Yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty epic. David Foster Wallace will not have that impact on the world, I don't think.
No, perhaps not.
History nerds aside, we're going to talk about the positive things, because if he was not considered a genius, then he was at least an incredibly unique writer, possibly a once-in-a-generation type of person and writer. With his new financial success, he actually helped pay for one of his recovery friends' college tuition. He also lent his truck that he bought through the grant money that he got to a student. And like one of the days, a few weeks later, he embarrassingly told that class that he lost his truck. and that student presented the keys afterwards, also embarrassed to tell him that he lent them to them. Like that kind of professor. He also loved dogs. He was a big dog person, which is great. Huge yes in my book. Since pretty much getting sober, he had a dog. Of course, being Wally Weird over here, he did put food in his mouth so that the dog was, the food was sticking out so that the dogs could bite the other end, and eventually, the other end disappeared and he was not biting the other end anymore. I guess it's a normal enough occurrence for some people who love their dogs. I know there probably multiple people have commented about that on the internet. That's okay. But hey, I'm not going to do that. And I'll say a lot of people act weirdly around their pets. I'll stop the conversation right now before it gets into the realm of illegality. Yes.
Sure.
It's okay to act weird. Not that weird, guys.
Yeah, not in public.
He was able, and no, he would do that around his friends that were visiting his house all the time, which is even funnier, like as a party trick. Yes. So it's worth mentioning. But he was good with his dogs. He was able to write regularly for at least 2 hours a day, and then the next work he published was a short story collection, which is called Brief Interviews with Hideous Men. I also read this book, and though it is not the same standard as Infinite Jest, I think it's a pretty great short story collection. I'm not going to try to compare the two based on the effort that Infinite Jest had and thought that the books needed to write and publish them. But I would recommend reading Brief Interviews with Hideous Men if you want to see what his writing is like before jumping into Infinite Jest, right? He uses a lot of the similar techniques. His experimentation with style, story structure, and character development are very similar. Like he uses footnotes instead of endnotes. There's a whole short story that is basically just defining words in an incredibly intellectual way that I just had to breeze through. It was just like, honestly, a pattern I couldn't keep up with. Yeah. I also read that the book that we mentioned, his first short story collection, is kind of similar, called Girl with a Curious Hair, but can't recommend something I haven't read. And the Brief Interviews with Hideous Men itself is a collection of stories within this collection where he separates them and puts them throughout the book. So there's even a pace through the short story collection that is very interesting, that I haven't seen before. A lot of people do. So he would have the first section right in the beginning, then a couple in the middle, and I think he ends with it, but close to it. And the interviews are interesting themselves. The format, I haven't written this down, just kind of off the cut, is effectively interviews with bad men, right? The story, okay. It's the title itself, pretty interesting, but you don't get the question from the interviewer itself. All you get is an ellipses, so 3 dots, and then from the response you infer what the question was. So there's a little bit of pattern developing there. There's a little bit of intelligence from the reader that's required, some inference. So
sure.
I found it entertaining. Did I feel like I felt good after reading the book? No, but again, if you don't want to jump into a 1,000-page megalith that is Infinite Jest, try this out for size. He was also introduced to a new woman called Juliana Harms. The irony of her last name was that she worked at the Department of Children and Foster Services. We've mentioned that Dave was a philanderer basically at this time in his life. That doesn't mean he didn't want to get steady. More stable girlfriends from time to time came, some lasting a couple years. This time he took the relationship a little slower and was more mature, being 37 when he met and feeling like he wanted to settle down, partially because his younger sister just married and had her first kid, right? So there's also that social pressure. Sure. She moved into his house in Illinois and they eventually got engaged. Their relationship was great until it wasn't, right? She put him in rehab, and get this, for nicotine, which I did not know you could do.
Yeah.
Yeah. He was super dupery addicted to nicotine, being a habitual chain smoker, dip user, and nicotine patcher, and sometimes all 3 at once. That's, I guess, what you need to do to get into rehab for nicotine.
Yeah.
When he got out of rehab, he came back incredibly irritated to the point where he literally shoved a student when they were having an argument outside of one of his classes. Again, a big no-no, and it's the 90s, I guess. So I guess you were still able to do that back then. He started to pull away from her, kind of blaming her from this, and he would hide himself in his room. And then she found out that he was exchanging notes with a grad student. They split up, and he helped put down a down payment for her new house. He also found out that about 2 weeks after she moved in, she had a new boyfriend living with her. So, yeah,
Tough go,
all
yeah.
gravy. Yeah. So, ever the offer of making something absurd out of something normal, David Foster Wallace decides he wants to write about an IRS agent for his next novel. So he interviews a ton of IRS agents and takes courses on accounting. He creates a character that is an IRS agent who gets into porn, like porn acting, which means that he goes into his extensive research on porn again. Yes, second time in his life, right? Research.
Yeah, research.
The premise of this IRS agent turned porn star is that he is so pale, he worries he isn't captured well on the camera, so the goons watching it thinks that it's themselves performing the act. This is basically virtual reality, which is, like something that I was assuming is in the porn industry today. Like, he's predicting this without knowing how he's predicting it, right? This
got a lot of stuff right.
Yeah, right. Like, and again, I didn't add this, but basically he's in the middle of nowhere, Illinois, and this is the 90s before peak internet. So he had to request videos from New York City to be sent and rented to him. And then he would send it back via mail, right? Like
via mail.
I know, right?
Times have changed.
Is 30 years. This is 30 years ago.
Yeah.
So the concept of this book would be the Pale King. That's the novel, right? He also got into Buddhist concepts and began reading a lot about Buddhist literature at this point. He was raised irreligious and even dabbled with Catholicism when he got sober, because of the relationships that he had with women. A few of his steady girlfriends were Catholics. So this pushed him towards the papacy at one point. However, he could never fully buy into Catholicism, with a priest literally telling him that he was asked too many questions. Like, it's when you know that, there's something fishy going on.
Yeah, Catholicism is not for you.
Yeah, fishy, pardon the pun, the fish symbol of Christians. With Buddhism, he admits that he could never actually fully grasp the concepts of their religion espoused. His brain working in 1,000 different directions the way it did and never being able to shut down, which also, like, it's really kind of like the premise of Buddhism, that you really can't fully grasp the concepts of that religion, but that's besides the point. Few are able to do so, right? Like, that's a whole point of reaching samsara, right? Or at least, this is a very general overview of 3 different major strands of Buddhism, and we're not getting into that either. A lot of these modeled understandings of Buddhist concepts also found his way into the Pale King via the main character, right? I've mentioned the Pale King now 3 times at this point. This was another novel he struggled to write, and when he struggled, he tended to spiral. However, to say that he was only working on the Pale King at this point of his life is completely inaccurate. The genre and projects he worked on was cyclical in nature, as we mentioned in a previous episode. He would work hard on a novel, then take a short break and focus on finishing up and collect stories he worked on simultaneously or when the novel was published, and write new ones. Then he would lose interest in fiction altogether, write nonfiction, primarily essays, but also book reviews, and what I would loosely define as journalism, very, very loosely. Then, after a while, he would focus heavily on a new novel at the tail end of writing his nonfiction work, writing both simultaneously, right? Now, we are at the nonfiction point, and he was hired by Rolling Stone magazine to cover John McCain's 2000 run for the Republican ticket.
Interesting hire, yeah.
I know. I think they were trying to do a Hunter S. Thompson with him, but that's not what they got. I'll tell you that much.
No, I'm sure.
Yeah, Hunter S. Thompson claims that he changed the 1972 election. If he did, he's to be blamed for having Nixon inaugurated the second time. If you believe him. literally.
Interesting.
Yeah, I don't know if you read much Hunter S. Thompson, but the book, everybody
No,
says Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, or what this book on the what's the motorcycle gang? Jesus, the
Hell's
Hell's
Angels.
Angels.
Yeah.
Yes. I recommend Fear and Loathing on the Campaign Trail 72. It's a fascinating book. I read it
Oh,
like a decade ago. I would highly recommend that one.
okay.
Yeah, and if things are to be believed in that book, Hunter S. Thompson spread a lot of lies, as he admits it himself. Tangent aside, Wallace was never really into politics, but something clicked in his middle age during this campaign. Here is his quote from the essay he wrote entitled E Unibus Plurum. Quote, the brief, weird excitement generated might reveal about how millennial politics and all its packaging and marketing and strategy and media and spin and general sepsis actually makes us U.S. voters feel inside, unquote. The sepsis part being the key word there.
Yeah.
He wrote to his friend that McCain's run was, quote, 3 months tickling the prostate of the American century, unquote. What a dude.
Yeah.
His biographer states, quote, Wallace's conclusion was that McCain was America looking in the mirror, unquote. I think it is easy to say he did not enjoy his time on the campaign trail, did not enjoy McCain's politics. Now, we're jumping ahead here a little bit, but I think this is the best time to just group all of his politics together. But during the first Bush administration, Dave, who believed himself an apathetic centrist, got more and more vocal about politics because, Bush was objectively an awful president. We as a country have just insanely blurred in vision after imbibing the idiocracy that has been, the last year. And of course, our short-term memory over the first administration, of this current president was, horrible to begin with. So thinking back on the start of the war on terror and the housing bubble almost seems like a fucking fever dream, right?
It's all relative, yeah.
I know, it's like a lifetime ago. Anyway, when Bush won his second term, Wallace, like many other academics, were generally worried that academia would be targeted, and it absolutely was, just not in the same extent as it is currently right now. This has been in the GOP playbook at least for the last 40 years to defund academia and target it, at least. So let's put that out. It's just full throttle to the metal, no apologies anymore, right? So he started taking steps to leave the country, but ultimately he decided it was a dumb move. I don't know if this would have helped him, but in 2000, in 2005-06, that was what he was thinking of.
Okay.
Moving back a little bit in time, but any questions about that? Because we don't really have much of his actual political leanings. I think he was kind of a live type of person, but that's my understanding and take from him.
Yeah, no, I hadn't really thought of David Foster Wallace as being politically involved at all, to be honest. So it's interesting to see that he would even accept that kind of work, because it seems very off brand for him. So no, it's really cool to lean into.
Yeah, I mean, it's not the publication it is back in the 90s, but if anybody gets an offer to write for Rolling Stone, it's a pretty great offer. So it is a pretty reputable magazine in that way, or at least was. Now it's just 100 of the best guitarists of all time cycled with 100 of the best albums of all time. They've changed quite a bit.
I have not paid for Rolling Stone ever.
I think the last time I bought a Rolling Stone magazine was I was 15 and 16, and they literally had 100 of the best albums based off of Rolling Stone. I was just curious about the list, and this was, again, before you could see it on the internet. So
sure.
Yeah, and it also had a lot of posters, So
yeah, the posters are the big selling point for that kind of stuff. Nice centerfolds.
The right kind of centerfold.
Yeah.
Around this time, Davey F decided he needed another change, right? In the early 2000s. The Midwest was just not doing it for him anymore. So he applied for a teaching job in the creative writing department at Sonoma College, Claremont, California. During his interview process, again, he made it clear to the departmental head that he wanted to do as little teaching as possible, which is a funny thing to ask as a professor. And the department head agreed. They hired him to write. That's what he said. One of the ways that every college obtains and retain the notoriety and importance is having prestigious professors publishing proficiently, even at the cost of preeminence, right? It was during the interview process, he also met a visual artist named Karen Green. Karen created an art piece that was inspired by the short story Girl with Curious Hair. You know, the spite piece he wrote about a different woman. Karen and Davy fell in love, and this relationship would be his last. So remember that tattoo of Mary Carr?
Yeah.
He got it struck out and put an asterisk above it with a footnote underneath it saying, Karen.
That is incredible.
I know. He now literally put footnotes on his body. It's guys. I mean, it plays. That one plays.
Yeah, that is incredible.
I don't think anybody else could pull that off.
No. At least he didn't have endnotes. He drew the line at footnotes.
That one for sure. I guess if it was an end note, he would put the asterisk and then like the end note would be on his ass or something, right?
Yeah.
For the next several years, they lived happily in California. Wallace mostly writing nonfiction and struggling to write The Pale King. One of the pieces he did write at this time was probably his most famous essay called, quote, Considered Lobster, which would also be the name of the collection of essays published in 2005. Dave was hired by Gourmet magazine. Again, I have no clue how people like Gourmet is looking to think of hiring somebody like David Foster Wallace, but hey, that's pretty cool. If I got hired by Gourmet, I would to go to the 2003 Maine Lobster Festival, I would go too, which he does go to the 2003 Maine Lobster Festival, where he wrote about the ethics of boiling crustaceans alive for the consumption of humans while absolutely gorging himself on butter, lemon, and that delicious delicacy. I haven't read it. The thesis is pretty simple, but apparently people love that. It's like something that vegetarians or the people in college read all the time. Dave was not a vegetarian. Yeah, it's a pretty important piece. Just kind of funny that it comes from somebody that's not one.
Yeah.
Dave and Karen went back to Indiana for Christmas of 2004, where Dave's sister lured their parents to the courthouse. His parents were surprised to see him in a suit and his fiancée in a wedding dress. After the shotgun wedding, the newlyweds spent the evening watching Law and Order marathons in a bum hotel room. Romantic.
Absolutely. It's something he'd like.
Oh, it plays so well. In the summer of 2007, Dave Foster Wallace had serious heart palpitations while eating at a restaurant he ate frequently, so it wasn't the food. He went to see his physician. While there, he asked about getting on a different type of antidepressant rather than Nardil, which is the one that's been with him basically all his life. It effectively saved his life, right? He thought it was hindering his ability to write his newest novel, and that this was a dirty drug because it's pretty old. There must have been something newer and cleaner, right? It's been with him for almost 20 years, so that part is kind of logical. He stopped taking the pill and went through months of withdrawals because, again, you know, these type of drugs have these effects on people, which he expected, you know, these withdrawals and is the standard, again, for the medicine. But anybody on pills that are working, don't just stop taking it without the doctor's like guidance. That's a very big no-no, right? Like, don't do that. We'll learn about why, unfortunately, shortly. It just messed him up. He lost 30 pounds and was visibly older. You know, he's in his 40s now, right? You can't do that. He ended up hospitalized again for suicidal depression. For the next year, he tried an array of different drugs. After many arguments with his family, he also went and tried electroconvulsive therapy again, doing 12 rounds of it. We talked about ECT and how it doesn't work, right? Didn't work this time. And this eventually led him to check into a motel near his home in Claremont, California, and take every pill he could find. He woke up the next morning and called his wife because his wife didn't know where he was. His suicide note to her arrived in the mail a few days later. There would be one more half-hearted attempt, but those who knew a little bit about David Foster Wallace's life knows how it ends. His reflecting back on what had transpired, he knew that Dave started lying. Well, his wife knew that Dave started lying to her when he said he was feeling better for a few days there. Again, this is something that if somebody is in suicidal depression and they start saying, like, out of nowhere they feel a lot better, you really need to have them checked, because
Really?
people don't just snap out of it because, well, I'll explain later. On the evening of Friday, September 12th, 2008, Wallace suggested that Karen go to her studio. She was working on a collection, and the opening for her art was very soon. Dave had visited the chiropractor that Monday, and Karen said something along the lines is, you don't go visit a chiropractor if you're going to do what he did. Now quoting the biography directly, quote, after Karen left, Wallace went into the garage and turned on the lights. He wrote her a 2-page note. Then he crossed through the house to the patio, where he climbed onto a chair and hanged himself. His wife returned home at 9:30 and found her husband. In the garage, bathed in light from his many lamps, sat a pile of nearly 200 pages, unquote. This would be the shortened version and manuscript of The Pale King. Anything here?
Oh, it's very, very powerful. I knew that he hanged himself, but I didn't know the context. It's really, really cool, really heavy.
I mean, everybody says that it's a pretty selfish act. And when I was a kid, I never really understood it. And then I realized, like, somebody's got to find your body. Like, it's almost always going to be a loved one. It's just leaving the people behind like that is pretty
Yeah,
tough in
pretty
that
awful.
way. And I don't think I wrote it, but if somebody is in that kind of depression and then all of a sudden they feel better, there might have been that thought saying, well, finally, I'm just going to end this. And they're at inner peace on that. So
I see.
depression is a hell of a thing, right? In this series, has any ask for the listener, reach out to people who you love. When people who have been in depression for a while are suddenly calm and no longer worried, that's a sign things aren't going well.
Mm.
It's difficult to describe David Foster Wallace's influence today because it's continuously growing, right?
Sure.
We will discuss how Infinite Jest influenced many of its writers in the next episode, but his writing goes beyond that. His posthumous works include The Pale King, published in 2011, and was a finalist for the Pulitzer Prize, again, which personally I think the Pulitzer Prize is kind of a hacky prize when after reading a few Pulitzer Prize books recently, but whatever, that's besides the point. Again, give me a Pulitzer. I might edit that out. which Karen found, Karen Green found over 1,000 pages of notebooks that were given to about the Pale King itself, right? So that 200 pages was just what he accomplished and finished. There was over 1,000 more pages that he can write. The editor for Infinite Jest, Michael Peach, trimmed down the book to roughly 550 pages. That was the first edit, the first edition, excuse me.
Okay.
Karen would also do the original cover art for the hardback. Then another collection of essays were published the following year posthumously. So David Foster Wallace worked, his work helped influence and develop postmodernism, which is an interesting word. I'm sure that they'll develop another word for that because that's not very creative. He also developed maximalism and hysterical realism, those literary genres. Maximalism being the opposite of minimalism, right? It means adding everything you possibly can into the literature. And then hysterical realism, which is, I think that one's actually kind of self-explanatory. Two other examples of this, and we mentioned this, Cordo, in the first couple episodes, but like the book Gravity's Rainbow by Thomas Pynchon are all of these as well. So if you liked what you read there, I will read that one eventually, but that's another book that is in the same oeuvre of books. On a more playful note, he also created the inverse cost and quality law theory, which argues that the higher the budget of a Hollywood movie, the shittier the movie turns out to be. It means that the budget and quality are negatively correlated. He makes this argument in an essay by critiquing specifically Terminator 2 Judgment Day, which I think is hilarious. Yeah, I would have loved to hear what he had to say about the Marvel and Avatar franchises today.
Oh, yeah, he would have loved Endgame.
I know. So we're ending it on that high note. Any questions or comments before we conclude this episode?
It has been fascinating to take a look through his biography, and especially having read Infinite Jest, you kind of, or at least I kind of thought that he kind of came up with these concepts out of the ether, and that he had so highly developed, the junior tennis plot line and the recovery house, and I had kind of thought of him as a bit of a recluse who really was very much in the library in his head, and I didn't realize that basically if you look at Infinite Jest, it almost seems like it's just a reframing of his own life. And maybe that kind of lends to part of what makes Infinite Jest so fascinating, is that, the point of Infinite Jest is really not the plot. It's really it's the way that the characters and the experiences are framed and presented by the author that kind of that presentation itself is the meaning. So it's interesting. He basically wrote, in my opinion, almost his own biography, just with a few names and characters changed, and told the story through, or gave his message through his storytelling more so than the actual plot line. So that was the first time I've ever read something like that, and it's been really, really cool that this is where it came from. It's his own life.
That's, yeah, very apt. I would say all his books are all based on very much firsthand accounts. The Pale King, he probably struggled the most because, again, he wasn't a porn star. But to say that he did extensive research, quote unquote research, I mean, like it's funny to make fun of somebody who's like actually researching porn. But he did go to porn sets. He did like interview stars, for lack of a better term, at the time. So that part of the Pale King itself, he was pretty familiar with. He took literal accounting classes that you have to take to be an accountant in the IRS in order for him to write about that. He just delved into stuff and was, in some ways, I think the reason why Infinite Jest is more acclaimed is because it's far more personal, and he's able to write that, as opposed to the Pale King, which is like obviously published posthumously, so he didn't get to finish it himself. But like even his first book, The Broom of the System, both of those were a lot less personal because it was a lot more studying, right?
Yeah.
But we get to talk a whole episode about Infinite Jest, which is exciting. I would recommend, again, if you want to read his work, pick up a short story collection from the library. I'm sure you'll have it. I found brief interviews with Hideous Men at the local library, which was pretty surprising. And they also had supposedly funny thing happened to me that I'll never do again. So there's all that. His work is a lot more accessible than you would expect for the sum of the work that's actually not very mentally attainable to a lot. Like, I'm not going to say I understood everything. That's just not the point. And there's definitely, again, we're going to talk about Infinite Jest next episode, things that I just completely glossed over, being like glassy-eyed, don't really care enough to delve into this too much. Hint, hint, cough, cough, all the descriptions of drugs that he had there. Just passed right through that. And anything else before we close up? Because I'm just going to do plug sources and that's it.
No, just thank you so much for having me, Phil. This is a first time on a literature podcast, so it's been really fun, and I'm really enjoying it. So thanks so much.
Yeah, no problem. I'm happy you joined. Not a light topic, I'll tell you that much.
No. Jumping in off the deep end. It's cool.
Yeah, exactly. That's a good way of doing it, though. Some people are able to just go for the hardest possible thing, which is great. I appreciate the bravado and the self-confidence. Great.
If you need overconfidence, yeah.
So plug in the Patreon. That's Lost in the Library Podcast on Patreon. Also, questions, please send them lostinthelibrarypodcast@gmail. I had a good question recently, but it was for a different episode. Follow us on Instagram. Again, Lost in the Library there. Again, a couple more Instagram followers, which is fun. I have a Substack where you could read some of the work. It's just my name at Fil Deptula. Again, all this under development. I'm atrocious at social media. I just honestly, like a bad millennial, I'm a lurker more than anything else. So I need to learn how to figure that out. But whatever, I probably never will. I'm just going to be a Luddite. I'm going to choose to be one. So, like, I understand now why people are literally their entire job is just social media. It takes a lot of effort and time.
Absolutely.
The main source is Every Story is a Love Story, A Life of David Foster Wallace by D.T. Max. Books that I read by him himself: Infinite Jest, a supposedly fun thing I'll never do again, and then brief interviews with hideous men. Wiki articles about inverse cost and quality law, because why not? The Broom of the System, and Ludwig Wittgenstein and Yaddo. Yeah, one of the biggest, most acclaimed essays that he did was a book review about a different book that had Ludwig Wittgenstein's ideas that were past him. So if you want to know more about his at least philosophical upbringings, look him up. I'm definitely not going to research it because I cannot. I just don't have the patience to read philosophy. Yeah. All right. Well, have a great weekend. Are you coming to Cotillion?
Yeah, I'll be there.
Cool. I'll see you.
Awesome. Yeah, looking forward to it. Have a safe drive down.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah. Well, I'll say stay safe in this freezing cold weather, but this is Vermont. We're used to -9 degrees.
Exactly.
It's like
I hardly notice it now.
I was outside in slippers and my PJs because I needed to get something out of my car. I'm like, ooh, it's a little brisk.
Yeah. Anything below 10 is just cold. I think it's a myth. Like, oh, -9 is going to be really not. It feels the same as +5. It's all below 10. It's all just cold.
Yeah, seriously. That's why I like Fahrenheit, because I know that anything at 0 is actually freaking cold, and like 0 degrees Celsius is like, buddy, like the lake is still not frozen. Like, this is nothing.
Yeah. We got a ways to go.
Yeah, I forgot where I heard this from. I think it was a skiing friend of mine who also used to play rugby. But like, once you see -40, that's when you know that things are definitely different. That you can see -40. Yeah, it's crazy watching rivers freeze. That I've absolutely witnessed that before my eyes through sublimation. That's crazy.
Wow.
Yeah. All right. See you later tonight.
All right. Take care, man. Thank you.